This is Michèle from Jasami Publishing and the most recent edition of Jasami Bookworm Podcast. I am delighted with our visitor today. It is Andrew F.M. Wilson, also known as Andy. He is our poet laureate, as I like to say, and has so much more talent. And he's obviously with the short stories, The 13th Parable and other stories, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm delighted with what we're going to share because you've got so much talent that the audience doesn't know about that we want to let everybody know. So first, I'd like to chat about, I know you're phenomenal at poetry. We know you do phenomenal short stories, but you do music. You write music. Tell the audience about that, please.
Yeah, I've been playing bass guitar for, I think, about 30 plus years, probably easier to say. And guitar as well. Used to be involved in a lot of bands in the Glasgow music scene. We did quite a few gigs all over the Glasgow, things like that. Recorded an album as well. But I kind of fell away, over the years. I'm focused more on the kind of writing side of it. But kind of project ongoing at the moment for music, so we'll hopefully get that sorted pretty soon. It's exciting stuff.
It takes a lot. What inspires you for the music when you write music? Is it something you hear or a story? Is the music start out as a story? How does that work?
For myself, it tends to be, if I'm kind of messing around on the guitar, I'll maybe come across a kind of riff that I quite like, so I'll quickly record that, and 9 out of 10 times forget about it for a long time, and then I'll go back to it at some point. But most of my songs have been started out lyric-wise. I tend to write the lyrics first, and that kind of would set the tone for the music. Take it from there.
Do you know how many songs have you written? Do you know? Have you kept track at all?
What's about finished wise? I'd say over 20 odds. There's probably about double that lying about in tiny pieces and fragments.
Yes,
I will go back to it at some point.
Well, an idea comes across. It's like completing any writing project. Sometimes you get about, 3/4 of the way through it and can't find that correct ending. And then when you're inspired, there's been some writers that it's taken them such a long time. For example, this was a book, but Boris Pasternak, I hope I'm saying it correctly, wrote Dr. Zhivago, and it took 20 years. So projects can take a long time. So you'll kind of play with the guitar a bit, and then a lyric will come to mind. How is that inspired? Is it by something that comes into your mind? Is it something visual, or?
It kind of varies. I've always kind of kept the two separate. If I start to kind of write some sort of write something down, if it's inherently personal or whatever, I tend to more focus that on a poem. I discovered a long time ago, if you're writing something very personal and handing it over to somebody else to sing, it sometimes feels a bit strange. It's like someone else is pouring out your kind of heart. So songs I tend to focus on just more kind of made up type things, that sort of idea, and get all the personal stuff for the poetry.
Absolutely, because someone, it's like quotations, someone else saying your words and the feelings that have gone into it, the personal feelings that you express. Because I know when we've spoken before, you say poetry is quite cathartic for you.
Yeah, very much so.
And that you've been doing the poetry for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
does the music come in spurts? You'll work on it for a while and then stop, since you don't perform much anymore.
It does, to be honest. I'm trying to focus on doing a concept album that kind of ties into other stuff that I've done written wise. So that's kind of structured, and it's quite difficult to get back to where I want to take that thing, because it is so structured. Normally just a song, it can be done fairly quickly. Something I should focus more on, I think, give more time to, but as time goes on, it gets harder to get back to.
Yes, I call it life interrupt us. Are there other
Yeah,
musicians that you work with that you kind of bounce ideas off of?
the one I'm working with mostly just now, my friend Stuart. He's one of the best guitarists I've ever heard in my life. I can kind of hum something to him. He'll look at me and then he'll play it. That kind of thing. I'll send him like the most rudimentary idea on the guitar, which sounds like it's came from a 5-year-old. And next minute he's coming back with some incredibly complicated piece of music. I think, well, I can't even play that. Never mind write the rest of it. So he's fantastic.
Well, it's wonderful because writing is such a solitary occupation. It's just us and the computer, the typewriter, the laptop, whatever it is that we might use. It's a very solitary occupation. So I always wonder about, because sometimes music is written with someone else, or sometimes the artist will write it themselves and expressing their own personal feelings, but then they sing it as well. So, but they're talented that way. So the other question I have, kind of segueing into short stories and writing, with the 13th parable and other short stories, we all know that no one should read it before they go to bed at night unless they want a sleepless night. Where do the ideas for these stories come from?
The one that's the kind of funniest one is the scary one, and it called The Field, which centers around the farmhouse and the kind of supernatural goings on. That came about sort of twofold. It kind of merged together. I had been watching a documentary on World War One, where they were digging the tunnels underneath the trenches to try and blow up the opposite side, and it kind of struck me with a sense of horror. I thought, to be confined under the ground when you could hear the enemy soldiers digging, breaking through sometimes, and having to involve each other in sort of combat. So I had that side of it, and then I was driving home one evening, and I seen this. It was such a beautiful evening. I seen this gorgeous farmhouse illuminated by the sunshine, and it had the kind of water next to it. I thought, that's such a beautiful scene. And I don't know how my brain just merged those two, and I thought, imagine the horrors that could go behind such a beautiful scene. And I ended up just all the way home weaving it together, and it turned out to be the scary farmhouse that looked beautiful with the World War One sort of things behind it. So that one came from there.
Well, that's the truth, is that sometimes when you've got such a beautiful scene and then there's something really scary behind it, that's what makes it really scary, because the first part is so beautiful, and then that's the surprise in it. I guess kind of, well, like The Exorcist, little innocent child, and then when that takes over, what
Precisely.
they become, and that creates such a juxtaposition, for it.
Yep.
I really, really enjoy that. So there was another one that was kind of not so much a horror one, but it kind of had to do with gangsters and such. How did
Yeah.
that idea come to you? I love that story.
Initially, it came from a kind of an evening with some friends, and some of them had kind of acting aspirations, and they talked about, have to have something to do at the Edinburgh Fringe. And of course, my brain kind of went off, and I thought, well, I had this kind of rough idea an idea from the story, so I started to pen it as a play. So we could do this around the table kind of thing and involve it. So have it called Flip Side, where every character begins as something, but at the end of it, they're the opposite. So like the policeman's not the policeman, the big tough gangster's not really the big tough gangster, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So it came from there, and initially I wrote it as a play, and then I've expanded it into the story, and I had an idea for a part two, to carry it on, even though it kind of ends in one of these kind of sort of shootout situations where you think there is no one left. But I thought, no, I could carry this in a certain way, and it's expanded. So I even wrote a third one now as well, which will
See,
come hopefully in the next book.
you're very prolific. I love that part. Well, that's the thing. Even though you do end a story, it doesn't always have to be the end. I remember years ago in Dallas, Bobby woke up from a dream kind of thing, and that was
That's right, after
it was
several years.
strange. It was strange to have that. And then the other one, then the show Lost, they were all dead, and that disappointed so many people. And then sometimes the endings, when, they could have taken it somewhere else rather than
Definitely.
ending it. So you can always wake them up. No one's ever truly dead. Even if they're dismembered, you can get that sewing kit out.
That's it. Well, when I wrote the second part, and I thought, well, that's me finished. And then again, driving home, because I've quite a long commute from work, and just this idea hit me, and I thought to myself, oh, come on, not again. And I thought, I'm going to end up doing a third part here. And just more ideas kept coming, and the third part kind of wrote itself. So I had no choice but to write it down after that.
And that's the thing, you don't want to lose the story, because when you are inspired, when something does come to you, you definitely don't want to leave it.
Yeah.
Inspiration is so, because so many people suffer from writer's block. And I think that's
Oh, sure.
perfect utilization of time, because your mind can wander and it takes you to
Mm.
wonderful places. And that's where the stories come from. And so, all right. So essentially, when you're the longer, do you ever like drive around the block just to finish a story before you go home?
Yes, I've done that several times. I had one of the strangest experiences I think I've ever had was the one that we talked about, the field.
Yeah.
That I fully intended that to be a one-off short story. That's it, finished. And for some reason, again, this idea just hit me. I thought, oh, wait a minute. And then before I know it, I had all these things just getting thrown at me, and I literally arrived home. I opened the door, and my dog was there, and my wife was waiting to greet me. I said, "You'll need to leave me a minute." And I raced straight up the stairs, grabbed whatever paper I could, and I started writing all these things down. And before I know it, I had the field part 2 written in about a month. And that has never ever happened to me before, ever. I thought the whole thing wrote itself in my head. So it was
Sometimes they do.
interesting.
Yeah. They're alive in there, and it's as if someone's coming along, tapping and waking up the characters. And then
Exactly.
they live in your head. Now, this is a question I heard a podcast between two more well-established writers, and one said that the characters lived in her head and she couldn't make them do anything that they wouldn't do. They had their own personalities. The other writer said, "No, I control the writers. I block I pencil everything out, outline it so I know where it's going, and it's very structured, and they will do what I want them to do." Which do you follow, Andy? Which is your process?
I've tried the one where I control everything, and that's what I invariably do. Stumble write myself into a corner. And I always know when I'm forcing it. It takes on a tone then where it becomes, it's like, when I read it back, I go, well, that's the bit where I struggle, because I can tell it's forced. So I prefer to just say, okay, you're not speaking to me today, I'll put you away and see how we feel later on. And then it'll come back to me later. So I have quite a few like that. And I think some have fell out of me because I've not gave me any contact for a while. But hopefully I'll go back. But yeah, I prefer to just let it go organically.
And they speak to you, they become, alive in the head. I always like to say, see those people that live in my head, that I don't have to be taken away to any place where they it's
Definitely.
all characters. I blame the characters. So what do you do if you have writer's block and you really want to finish a story, whether it's a short story, a piece of music, whatever it might be? If you have writer's block, is there something that you do to help trick and get by it?
No, to be honest, I've tried that. No, I try to just leave it unless I'm kind of faced with a specific deadline. Then I'll try my best, but I prefer to just let it lie.
Mm-hmm. And
Because
then,
I found that as well with some of the poems. It's like if I try to write it too quick, it loses something. I like to let it kind of ferment and then build up, and then I can go back to the end, and it comes more naturally that way.
yes, especially since the poetry is based more on the internal feelings and situations of the time. So it's,
Yeah,
the fact that you have to assess it. And I think that would help with the poetry more than anything else. On a story,
yeah,
kind of, sometimes with writer's block, it's different for everyone. If I have it, I step away And then, I once during NaNoWriMo years and years ago, I had to finish it by the end of the month, 50,000 words, and I couldn't get the ending. And I went away and watched a movie with Michael York, and then I came back and I finished it because I got a scene out of that. So it's very different. You're right when there's a deadline to it, because I had a deadline, self-imposed, but it was a deadline.
Some
So,
people do work better to deadlines, but I tend to try and avoid getting to the last stage.
right. Well, it's all inspiration, and it's the quality of the work rather than the quantity. I reinforce that to any of the authors that I'm working with or anybody that I'm mentoring on a piece of work. I say it's about quality, not quantity, and work on it, getting it right. Sometimes you have to just write and get it down, as you did with the second story. You got it down, but you knew where it was going. And
Yeah.
that's the key part. So you do music. You said about a play. Have you written many plays? One of the stories started off as a play. Have you written many plays, and how does the structure work for that?
It's just that one. Yeah, the flip side, it started off as a play. So I have it written down as a full script as well, but it differs slightly from the story. There's a lot of things in like a script that you can't put in, in a story sort of thing. But you can just quite accurately describe someone's shiftiness of their eyes or how they're sitting. It comes across differently when you have to convey that as a command on the script. So it makes you think differently when you're writing it.
The structure is very, very different. The structure for script writing is very different.
Yeah.
And structured. Of course, when anybody is is submitting work to a publishing company, the large houses have a very prescriptive idea, of how they want to receive it. Whereas we get submissions always in, typewritten form, but, in different areas when they come to us. What was your dream when you were younger? I know you worked on poetry to kind of, help with life.
Yeah.
Did you always dream of being published? Did you always want to get that was it the poetry you wanted to do? Did you want to get a play done first? The short stories? Was there any particular format that you thought, oh, I'd really love to have that published first?
Well, this is a very strange thing to say, but the one thing I never ever intended to publish was the poetry. And I should perhaps explain why.
Until you encountered Jasami Publishing, that was a different story. Uh-huh.
Because initially, when I started off doing the music, that was my main thing. I wanted to get the music out there. And I think I've mentioned this before, that when you're writing music, lyrics for music, you can't have a free rein. You're confined to what time signature you're using, that sort of thing. So you have to cut words all the time. And then I kind of found one day, my first poem was about a kind of heated argument with my mother when I was a teenager. So I started to write that, but write it as if I was writing a song, but without the confines. And that's how I ended up kind of naturally falling into doing the poetry. I discovered that when I had these feelings and I had these issues I couldn't deal with, to write them down in poetry form, that's how I led on to that.
Well, you'd be amazed, Andy, how many people actually write because it is cathartic. It's one of the authors, it was, the loss of a family member. And the writing is now it might not have anything to do with that, but it's the actual act of writing and how it works and where it goes and concentrating on something else. It brings something different to every single author. And, as we know, some are very, very gifted, some it's not so much, but it is very, very interesting what each author feels. I'm going to pause this. I think the feelings that we have inside come through and are expressed in our characters, which is really great and very cathartic. So we can do that and pass it off on someone else. That's why murder mysteries are great, because then you don't have to go to jail.
That's it.
You can
Going a murderous rampage on your head.
take care of them. The other story that I really loved was called What Lies Beneath. Where did that one come from? Because that was the first short story I read. I was so intrigued with it.
Trying to remember how that one came about. I was just sort of, I remember having this idea of like a light where we shouldn't see a light, and it came that sort of thing, like the mountainside. It should just be all natural mountainside, and there was some people kept seeing this light, and where could this light come from? And it just kind of graduated from there. And it turned out as I don't know if people have realised it's actually a prequel to the 13th parable.
Mm-hmm.
The characters mentioned in that. So that's how it starts from there.
What advice would you give to young up and coming authors? Because you've been writing a very long time and now you're published, Andy. What advice would you give to someone who's starting out? What do you think is most important?
Just to kind of have your idea and run with it, stick with it. Don't get caught up with other opinions or try to take away from what your vision is. Just try and just always be truthful to what you're writing. If it's coming from the heart and not from anywhere else, you can't really go wrong.
I think that is such great advice. It really is. And for everyone to understand that their own writing, their own author's voice is what makes their story good. And sharing it with others is very important. So I think that's been a wonderful wee chat. Have you
enjoyed it? Yeah, it's been great.
So we're in December. I can't believe how close it is to Christmas. I mean, it's just over a week away. So do you have any special plans coming up?
My main plan, my personal favourite is Christmas Eve, where my wife and I watch 2 films, and there's a lot of ports and several different types of cheese involved. That's my favourite. And then the mayhem with the families and everything kicks in. But I like that calm moment.
The calm before the storm. Oh, that sounds heavenly. There's nothing wrong with a good cheese and a lovely glass of port. Oh, I think that sounds wonderful. Well, at the end of every episode, we always have a shout out. Andy, who would you like to give a shout out to?
To my family, let's say to my family, to my wife Maggie, and my kids, and my grandkids as well. And of course my parents and siblings for all the inspiration. And a very special thanks to Jasami as well for all the help and support and being so fantastic. Especially Michèle.
Thank you, thank you. My head is just expanding as you say that, but thank you so much. Thank you, I appreciate that. My shout out today is to all of our listeners. Thank you for sharing the ride that we take once a week. We try to make it varied with not just about Jasami, but the importance of our authors and what they share in life, and then the people that we work with, such as Arcbound and the other charities, the Music Hall, and all of those people who give so much of their time to do the podcasts for our audience. So I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to you all. It's getting close to Christmas, but we're going to continue with the podcast a week. So there will be another one next Friday. In the meantime, I will be getting another year older, but that won't affect it. I'll still keep it up. I'll keep on working. So in the meantime, as always, I wish you a sunny day from Michèle at Jasami Bookworm Podcast. Thank you.